The two pairs of shoes splashed past the bookshop window so close the rain hissed against the glass, and the man in the long dark coat slipped through the door without ringing the bell. He pulled it shut with a hand that knew exactly how to close a door quietly, and stood listening for the shoes to keep going. From the back room, through the narrow service doorway, old Mr. Petrescu saw him do it. Mr. Petrescu had run the little neighborhood bookshop on Lantern Lane for 46 years, and had learned, in that time, the difference between a man running from a bad day and a man hiding from someone with a camera. This one was hiding. The bell had not rung, because the man had caught it as he came in. Mr. Petrescu sat still in his armchair, his blanket across his knees, and let his granddaughter handle it. He was 81, and the doctors had told him this winter that he was not to climb the ladder anymore. Leah had moved into the flat above the shop in March to mind the till until he was steadier on his feet. She was 23, with ink-stained fingers from cataloging, a kind, expressive face, and dark hair tied back in a low knot with a few loose strands at the temple. And she had no idea whatsoever at this moment that she was alone in a small bookshop with the most dangerous man in the city. She looked up from the ledger and smiled at him the way she smiled at everyone, easy, unhurried, a working person's polite hello. "Awful out there," she said. "Come in. Shake yourself off on the mat. There's a hook for the coat if you want." The man did not take off his coat. He nodded to her once, very small, and stepped further in. Mr. Petrescu watched him scan the shop the way a careful man scans a room: the front window, the side window, the service door, the back stair, the way out, and then watched the moment the man's shoulders dropped half an inch, as if he had decided this was safe for the next quarter of an hour, and what was inside it was only books. He moved toward the poetry shelves. "Looking for anything in particular?" Leah asked, the way she always did. She was already coming around the counter because that was how the shop worked. You did not stand behind the counter when a customer was here, you walked the shelves with them. "A children's book," the man said. His voice was very low. It was the kind of voice a man uses when he is used to being listened to without raising it. "An old one. Lantern Songs * by Havers, the blue cover with the moon on it. My mother used to read it to me." Leah's face lit. "Oh, we don't have one on the shelf, I'm sorry, but my grandfather kept one. The good edition, the 1962 with the ribbon. It's on the top of the back stack. Give me 1 minute." She did not wait for him to say yes. She was already moving toward the rolling ladder. Mr. Petrescu in his armchair lifted his eyebrows. Lantern Songs was 3 shelves above the height a sensible person reached for, and he had been telling Leah all autumn that the top stack needed a sort. She had been promising she would, and had not. Now she pushed the ladder along its iron track until it stopped under the right column, hooked her shoe over the bottom rung, and went up. The man in the long coat from below said quickly, "Don't trouble yourself. It is only." "It is not trouble," Leah said halfway up. "Stay where you are, I have it." She came down with a blue cloth-bound book in both hands, a small embroidered crescent on the spine. She set it on the counter and opened the cover with the care of someone raised on books, turning the title page toward him so he could see the date. "Grandfather's own copy," she said. "We can't sell it, but I can lend it to you if you'd like to read a poem and then bring it back." Or she tilted her head. "Wait, there were 2. One was for sale somewhere. Hold on." She went up the ladder again. Mr. Petrescu, watching from his armchair, saw the man in the long coat take a small step toward the foot of the ladder. He did not look up. He simply stood close enough that, if the rung gave way, he would be where she fell. Mr. Petrescu had seen well-bred men do that gesture before, and had always liked it. He decided he would not, for the moment, come out of the back room. Leah came down with a second copy, the cheaper edition, no ribbon, a little foxed at the edges. £4, she said. "Not the pretty one, but the poems are the same. Same Havers, same lantern, same moon." The man set a 20 on the counter. He did not ask for change. He laid his hand on the book for a second before sliding it toward himself, the way a man does when he is touching a thing he had thought he would never see again. Leah did not press him about it. She rang the till, slid the change across the wood, and then, because the rain on the window had not let up, said, "There's tea in the back. I just put the kettle on. Would you sit down for a minute? It's coming down too hard to walk out into. The kettle's 10 seconds from boiling and it would be a waste." The man hesitated. Mr. Petrescu saw him hesitate. He saw the man look once at the front window, where 2 umbrellas were now standing across the street, very still, very interested in the bookshop's signboard. Then he looked back at the young woman with the ink-stained fingers who was offering him a chair and a hot drink as if he were any tired man. And Mr. Petrescu watched something in his face quietly give way. "Thank you," the man said. "I would, yes." She brought him a chipped enamel cup, sugar in a little jar on a saucer, and a small biscuit because, she told him, her grandfather always said you couldn't drink tea without a biscuit. It was structurally unsound. The man smiled, a small smile, only on one side of his mouth but a real one, and she went back behind the counter and let him alone. He read the first poem. Mr. Petrescu watched his shoulders settle. He stayed 22 minutes. When he left, he set the empty cup on the counter and said, "I will come back tomorrow, if I may, for the next poem. It is easier to read it here." "Of course," Leah said. "I'll have the kettle on." She watched him through the window. She did not see the 2 umbrellas fold and follow him 3 doors down and break off when a black car slid up to the curb and took him in. She only saw a tired stranger in a long coat walk away with a small blue book under his arm. Mr. Petrescu in the back room sat and thought. The stranger came back the next afternoon. He came the day after that, too, and twice the following week. He always came in the late afternoon, when the rain or the early dark gave him cover, and he always caught the bell. He read 1 poem only and drank 1 cup of tea. He never gave his name. Leah never asked. Mr. Petrescu, who had begun to take his own tea in the back room with the door cracked open so he could listen, learned a great deal by listening. He learned that the stranger had been an only child, that his mother had died when he was 9 and his father 2 years later, that he had been raised by an uncle who was kind in his way but did not read aloud. He learned that the stranger had thought, for 30 years, asterisk lantern songs had been thrown out with his mother's things. He learned that the stranger could quote, softly and without looking at the page, the whole poem about the cat on the wall, and had not realized he still knew it until Leah, wrapping parcels, asked him to read it aloud for her. He also learned what Leah did not know. He learned it from the way one of the umbrellas came back twice and stood across the street pretending to read a notice, from the way a black car drifted past Lantern Lane each afternoon at 5 and again at 10 past, and from a small printed item in last Friday's paper about a certain Don who had not been seen at any of his usual addresses for over a week. Mr. Petrescu read the item twice and said nothing to his granddaughter. He had lived long enough to know when a stranger needed a quiet hour more than he needed his name said. The stranger had been coming for 15 days when the door slammed open, without anyone catching the bell. A young man burst in. He was perhaps 26, dark-suited under a soaked overcoat, his face pale and his breath sharp. He stopped 2 steps inside the door when he saw who was sitting in the corner chair with the chipped enamel cup. The relief that broke over his face was so complete that for a second Mr. Petrescu thought he might cry. "Don," the young man said. The word came out hoarse. "Don, please, we have been, sir, we have been all over the city. Mrs. Esposito has not slept. Please, please come." The bookshop went still. Leah had been kneeling on the floor behind the counter, restocking the lower shelf. She rose slowly, the cloth still in her hand. She looked at the young man in the dark suit, and then she looked at the stranger in the long coat in the corner chair, with her grandfather's chipped cup in his hand and her grandfather's blue book on his knee, and Mr. Petrescu watched her face very carefully, because everything in the next 10 seconds depended on it. She did not gasp, she did not flinch, she did not bow. She set the cloth on the counter. She walked in her plain working dress to the little stove in the alcove, picked up the kettle and came back. She set it on its trivet. Then she turned to the man in the long coat and said very calmly, "Would you still like the tea, sir? It will only take a minute." The man in the long coat, the Mafia boss, the Don, the man for whom an entire city had reportedly been losing sleep, looked at her for a long second. And then his mouth did the small, one-sided smile again, the real one, and he set down the chipped cup and the blue book on the side table and stood up. "Yes," he said, "I would like the tea, thank you, Leah." It was the first time in 15 days that he had used her name. He had read it off the till receipt the very first afternoon and kept it to himself. Mr. Petrescu in the back room exhaled. The young man at the door blinked, and then very carefully shut his mouth, and stepped back outside into the rain to stand by the black car at the curb. The umbrellas across the street did not move. The Don sat back down in the chair. Leah poured. When she handed him the cup, her hand was steady. "I take it," she said very softly, "that I should not call you sir any more." "You may call me whatever you like," he said. His voice was not the voice of the man no one dared cross. It was the voice of a tired person who had just been given a kindness. "Sir is fine. Leah, I owe you the truth. I am what he said. I came in here because I needed not to be that for an hour. You gave me the hour. You gave me 15. "You weren't lying," she said. "You just weren't telling me. Those are different." She sat down on the other low chair, the one her grandfather used, and folded her hands in her lap. "Why the book?" "Because it was the only thing my mother left," he said. She nodded. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "Drink your tea before it goes cold. We'll talk about the next poem after." From the back room, Mr. Petrescu put his hand to his face. He had not cried in his armchair for a long time. He cried now, very quietly, the way an old man cries when he understands that something that mattered to him is in good hands. The Don came back the next day, and the next. On the third day he brought a young woman in a dark coat who introduced herself as Mrs. Esposito, the household manager, and said, "Madam, I want to thank you. He has slept the last 2 nights. He has not slept like that in 3 years. Leah, who was not a madam, took her hand in both of hers and said, "He is a nice man." "It is not very complicated." The black car began to stop in the late afternoons at the corner of Lantern Lane. The Don did not bring guards into the shop. He came alone. He read his poem. He drank his tea. He spoke to Mr. Petrescu when Mr. Petrescu came shuffling out with his blanket, with a deference the old man had not been offered in a long time. On the 4th such evening he asked whether he might take the liberty of buying the bookshop's roof, which Mr. Petrescu had been worrying about, and having it mended. Mr. Petrescu, with great dignity, said the bookshop could pay for its own roof, thank you. The Don laughed, a real, startled, small laugh, and said, of course, he would simply send a man he trusted to take a look. They shook hands. The Don's hand was warm. What he did not do was sweep Leah up. He did not move her out of the flat above the shop. He did not put a ring on her finger that first week, or the second, or the third. He understood, Mr. Petrescu watched him understand, that this woman had given him the one thing he had never been given before, which was an hour in which he was not the Don, and that to drag her at once into the life of the Don would be to spend the gift the moment he received it. So he came slow. On the 6th week he asked her to dinner at a small restaurant with a back booth and no photographers. She said yes. On the 9th week he asked her up to the big house on the hill to meet his old aunt, who had raised him after his mother died and had asked, 3 times, who the young woman was who had cured his sleeping. She said yes. The aunt, small and sharp-eyed and dressed in black, held Leah's face in both of her hands and said, "You did not bow." Leah, who had not understood it was a test, said, "I had a kettle on, ma'am. It would have been silly." The aunt laughed until she had to sit down. He proposed in the bookshop on a wet afternoon in March, between the last poem of Asterisk Lantern Songs and the closing of the till. He did not kneel. He set on the counter between them the blue cloth-bound book, Mr. Petrescu's good edition, with the ribbon and on top of it a plain gold ring that had belonged to his mother. "I am asking you," he said, "because you knew me before you knew me. I do not want to be the Don in this room. I want to keep being the man who came in for the poem. Leah, stay, marry me. Sell me the book 1 chapter at a time for the rest of my life, so I have a reason to come back." She did not put her hand over her mouth. She did not weep. She picked up the ring and turned it once in her ink-stained fingers, and then she looked at her grandfather in the doorway, and her grandfather nodded, and she set the ring on her own hand. "Yes," she said, "but you have to finish your tea first. It is structurally unsound to take a ring without the biscuit. The Don laughed again, the real one, the startled small one. He finished the tea. He ate the biscuit. He took her hand across the counter very lightly and held it. Outside, the rain on Lantern Lane eased. Mr. Petrescu, from the back doorway, watched the most feared man in the city hold his granddaughter's hand at the counter, as if it were the only warm thing he had ever been allowed to keep, which, the old man thought, was probably the truth of it. The Don had been given the one thing his power could never have bought. It had been given for free, by a young woman with ink on her fingers, who had climbed a ladder for a children's book and poured tea for a tired stranger because the rain was hard, and who, when the world's name for him came bursting through the door, had simply asked whether he still wanted the cup. He did, he always would.